This week's channel message from the angels is a beautiful and deep message, poetic message about the journey of our soul, really about how we are evolving to become a multifaceted, multidimensional consciousness. So welcome back to my channel, you guys. It is wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you guys sharing these messages together. I feel like we all get more out of them. I certainly get more out of them by sharing them with you. I feel like in the conversation and the comments that you leave, that my own understanding deepens and grows. So thank you so much. And for those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Ann Tucker. I'm a trance channel. I channel from the angelic realm. I do that by going into a deep meditative state or trance. And from there, I raise my awareness up as high as I can go. And then I stretch a little bit higher. I connect at the angelic realm, and then messages and information and healing come through, and I share it here with you guys on YouTube. So today's message is, like I said, it's a beautiful one, and I'm going to share it. For my format is, first I will play the original channeling, and then afterwards I will come back and we will break it down and talk about it in more depth. And this is one that definitely benefits from breaking it down and talking about it, because there's just layers, that like you'll get stuff the first time, and I think it's great when you first listen to it. If you just kind of let it flow over you the first time, like don't focus too much. Like if you get the meaning the first time, phenomenal. But if you just kind of hang out and just because there's a lot of energy that comes through with these messages, there's frequencies that come through, and so if you just let those move through you, it can be very, very uplifting. And then afterwards, you can get more deep into the actual content and the teachings that they're sharing with us in the message when we break it down. So, and then here's the timestamp for when the message starts. And then here's the timestamp for when the conversation, the breakdown afterwards starts. And if I was going to sum up the message, I would say that it is about, imagine that as we were wanting to better understand ourselves as a soul, or even if you wanted to go all the way back and say, when did Source want to understand itself, himself, herself, that Source broke herself apart into many different pieces, right? And each one of those pieces is a soul that then went out to experience itself, right? To understand itself more deeply. Well, each of us, we are those souls. And then we in order to understand ourself, we did exactly what Source did, is we then broke ourself apart into a million different pieces. And each one of those is a different incarnation or a different life. And then we are meant to go out and live each one of those lives fully. And when we do, each life, if we fully invest and experience and live that life, we draw that back to our center. And they describe that process as breaking ourselves apart, and then we bring all them back in to create a bridge between our deepest wound and our higher self. Each piece we bring back in is like we're building a column in our center that slowly connects us from our deepest wound to our highest height. And so it's really, really cool how they describe it to help us understand the journey that we are on and where we are headed to, which is a pretty incredible destination. Also, a quick reminder, if you would like to join us for Soul Convergence, we are starting Soul Convergence this upcoming next Saturday, June 15th at 10 a.m. is our kickoff call. Soul Convergence is my deepest healing program. It's where we work on really building this center column, reincorporating all those aspects of who you are in a very intensive program, which is designed to balance your masculine and feminine energies, bring them together so that you can connect to your higher self. So don't wait. We start next Saturday, and then we will offer it again in the future, but it will be quite a ways out. So this is, if you want to do it, don't miss it. Come and join us this Saturday. All right. I hope you enjoy the message.
The pulpit of shadow and shade remind yourselves of the tomorrows that have yet to become. The shadow, the shade, the efforting, the restriction, the condemnation of tomorrows. The shade reveals where you are formed, where you've come from, the deepest caverns of your own solitude. The awareness of selves stems from this point, beckoning to who you are. It draws you down and through to your center. The secondary rising of humanity comes through and between another layer of comprehension. It comes through you now as you are beginning. The second rising of yourselves shall be intermixed with this foreshadowing. It shall carry the weight of your prior selves in the marrow of your becoming. At the core of who you become, there shall be this heavier self, the one you are formed from. And this shall strengthen what you are, not weaken it. This shall draw you forward and into a new instantiation of what you will become. The prior selves of who you are not heralded as becoming in this new time frame. They are not of the self that rises, but they are intermixed and in between the many layers of what you are. They form the structure, the substance, the meaning, the caretaking you have done of your own selves rises to meet the next self and the new beyond. But the intermediary has always been the structure of who you are now, the conveyor of this timely becoming, the many seconds spent in understanding what you are now. The seldom seen layers of your deepest heart carry an internal message to draw forward to you now, a secondary heartbeat, a new becoming, a deeper part of yourself that must rise up and through who you are. It is as though you carry inside of yourself a prior self and a new self, conjoined as one, as if this very self and soul you will become rises from you now, connects and moves through to the beyond measure of which you will endow a treasure. The self who you are is betwixt the many layers of meaning that have been formed in the discovery of self. But these past harmonies dwell within you still. These seconds of meaning, secondary time frames, alternate realities, new beginnings, all conjoin into harmony and play a chord. And this chord you shall climb toward your own ascension and shift in consciousness. It is as though a bridging has begun through you, through the rising energies, the column at your center, as though all that has been undergone and undone has created a pathway through which you move. The second understanding of you exists now in another place far beyond here, beyond the reach of your own consciousness as it sits. It is a secondary placement of your reality existing now, not permeable to yourselves at the moment. It is as if your meaning extends beyond tomorrow's into a new framework entirely, and you cannot know the context yet, for it does not yet exist. It surrounds you now and will evolve as that time is met. But to create the conveyance to move through, you must begin and find yourself upon a precipice and throw yourself off into the engulfing chasm of this now known cosmos and reality. And within this space, you unfurl and unveil yourself in many ways at once and become something of a divided prospect and perspective of oneself, as if in this fractionalization you can divide yourself into so many meanings, and in the process of becoming each one, create anew the lacings and intertwinings by which you shall recreate the whole again. And in this process, you find your way through beyond the chasm of doubt and uncertainty back to the wholeness, beyond conjecture into sureness, into self as solid matter, as self who is resolved upon, into the time frame beyond the now. This perspective that we share of yourself is congratulatory, for we see you as you are become, as we have met you already. We see you in the context, without formality, as one who is disguised no longer, who wears themselves in all incarnations, in all ways and methods of having been evolved. And you carry this neatly within your framework, within the very bones that circulate, within the marrow of your soul. Here holds the history that you are evolving even now. Here holds the great and sonorous envelopment of existing beyond the veil, where all things are felt to be real and nothing is pertinent to who you really are. All of this congeals into the solidity of understanding that creates a soul of multifaceted dimension, and reality conforms to who you will be then, and you will become someone, something far greater than you have been, one who can reveal within their own heart pathways to begin forming a new wholeness of consciousness, a new serenade of sharing between and among humans. Within this new framework of solidity, the time shall be felt as mere seconds, but the reality shall carry the information of leagues of generations of all you have ever been. And all of this is pervasive throughout your spoken tones, as though the wisdom you've accumulated is a chorus that moves through you with every breath. And you carry all of this within and among and between one another. And it is the wisdom of lives that are shared in congruence with a reality that behooves you all, where all is shared, admired, and conformed into a container which shall be revealed by the thoughts formed within it.
So yeah, so this, I feel like this message is really deep. It's a deep one, and it's talking about us in a way that is like, yes, we are fractals, right? Where inside of one thing there's another thing and there's another thing, and then we are also faceted. So like a diamond, has many different angles, and through every angle it's still a diamond, but you're seeing something else reflected in that facet. So we have these two things that they're playing with in the conversation, and they're angels, so they're like, yeah, we can talk about this from every different perspective, and we're just like, we're human, and it's hard to keep up. I guess this is complicated, but it sounds so simple, and yet it's really complicated. So let's break it apart, because I feel like it's a fascinating message. And you guys are saying chord and chord. Yes, yeah, exactly. Like chords that bind, and then a chord of music. And they make a lot of musical references, which is funny because I am not musical. Like I love it, but I'm not a musical person. So, but they talk about music and music stuff all the time, music metaphors, because I think they are very musical. Yeah. And Alea says that new me just called me during this message that my heart started to ache. Oh, I love it. I love it. You're saying rep fractals and facets. Yep. Gail says, love the wisdom you've created is a chorus. Yes, I know, right? It's the song of our soul. And you were saying you received a strong activation while you were sharing that well, there is energy in this one. So I am not surprised, Aaron, because you were pretty sensitive. Yeah. And there's a ton of energy in this, which is super cool, you guys. It really is. Like they are working. I feel like as they're sharing this message, they are working to draw us up and through that the center column we are in the process of building inside of us. So I guess the best way for me to understand this message is they're saying that we are trying to become a multi-dimensional soul. And like think of that as a multifaceted diamond, like a soul that reflects every part of ourselves, that every part of us is expressed. And the only way to do that is what we did is they described it as jumping off a cliff, and they did not mean jump off a cliff. As nobody read it that way. That's not what we're supposed to do. That is incarnating. That's how I read that. They talk about jumping off a cliff as us incarnating, jumping into the chasm and breaking apart into a million pieces. And fascinating, they're saying here basically that when we jump off the cliff, when we incarnate, boosh, we break apart like tempered glass, and all of our lives are created at once. And I've had multiple confirmations of that in other messages from them. But imagine you jump off the cliff and literally all the beings that you are going to be, all the human lives you're going to have, are all incarnated right at that moment. Fascinating, right? So we break apart in all these pieces, and then gradually we start picking them all back up one at a time. And each one we have to pick up, and we have to live it, and we have to fully live and experience and fully embody that life as much as we possibly can, and try to get as much out of it as we possibly can. And when we move through that life and learn to love ourselves in that life, we bring that life back into our heart. And and then doing that, we recreate the self that we are. But we are now made up of all these broken bits that we've incorporated, which makes us multifaceted. So that's the idea. So it's really about a soul's progress. How does a soul grow? How does a soul become deeper and richer? Oh, this makes me think of, I watched a program recently about what fractals are. And they showed me, this is so interesting, that if you measure a coastline and say that you get, like you say, this is the coast of Africa, and you just take a line from here to here and you draw a straight line, you will say that coast is, 200 miles long. But then if somebody else comes along and they draw, like they include a couple little bays and they include some peninsulas and stuff like that, and all of a sudden somebody else says, no, that stretch of coastline is actually 500 feet long. Well, fractals take those little in-between bits and they break them apart infinitesimally into like teeny tiny little bits, more and more and more pieces, so that it becomes and they do it by taking the shape that was first there and incorporating it again. And so almost like if it was a triangle, they break every line of that triangle into like more triangles and more triangles and more triangles and more triangles. So that is the multifaceted self. And the only way you get there is by taking that straight line and breaking it into as many smaller pieces as you possibly can, right? So, and when you do that, you could end up with what used to be a 200-mile coastline. It now will read as a 2,000-mile coastline and it's the same distance. It's just that you've measured every little tiny bit. So what that tells you, if you think about it just in terms of distance, that how much more meaning you get, how much more content there is in 2,000 miles than there is in 200 miles. So yeah, so that's kind of the idea of fractals. Super cool. So let's break it apart and talk about the pieces, because there are some real treasures in here, and I think this one really will get a lot more out of it talking it through. And Kim says, if we are multidimensional beings, is this message from the angels speaking to all of these fractals at this very point in what we would call now? Isn't that oh my gosh, that's like such a brain. That's where my head goes when you ask that question. I've wondered that. Okay, so here's where I go. When we heal now, like I am very attuned to one of my lives specifically, what the angels call my shoulder life, which is a whole nother concept we can get into another day. But I have this other life that I'm very aware of, that I channeled about it. I got tons of details about it, and then I actually found this person who was like a known person in history. He's not like super famous in his country. He's known, and I was a guy. But anyways, I'm wondering if I heal now, because he's living now too. Does he heal? Right? Like, can I? And would that rewrite history? Right? Because he's in the history book. So if I heal now and he heals, so that part, my mind goes, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I can't answer that. Like, that is that's beyond my pay grade. That's all I can say. I'm gonna need a little help on the angels on that one, because it's too complicated for me. Yeah, great question, Kim. The Fool in tarot, you're saying. Oh, and that must be in response. Is that because the Fool is about quiet? Isn't the Fool about going inward? I think I don't remember. Ronnie says, very cool analogy of fractals and the makeup of our souls. Thanks, Rodney. So, okay, so let's go into paragraph 1. Here's what they say. The pulpit, and this is so interesting, their word choices are always just boom, The pulpit of shadow and shade, remind yourselves of the tomorrows that have yet to become. So, whoof, like pulpit. So what does it make you think of, pulpit? So a pulpit is like, that's the place that people preach from, right? And preaching, it's that idea that somebody else holds the truth. Right? So when someone else holds your truth, when someone else is preaching to you, and think about all the experiences that humans have had through history about fire and brimstone and like watch out or you're going to go to hell and all this kind of stuff, right? The pulpit of shadow and shade. So this is the ways that we've been cast down, right? And then that heaviness, the pulpit is like by a judge, like we've been judged, And so this is about judgment. So it is that the judgment, shadow, and shade, the ways. And think about that, we throw shade on someone. Like when someone throws shade, it's like they're in judgment of that person, putting them down, right? So that's what they're talking about here. So and pulpit of shadow and shade, remind yourselves of the tomorrows that have yet to become. The shadow, the shade, the efforting, the restriction, the condemnation of tomorrows. So this is where we are creating our tomorrows from our wounds, right? So the shadow and shade, the tomorrows that have yet to become. So we have been living a karmic experience where we are creating our tomorrows from the wounds, from our judgments, from the shade that we throw on ourselves. We are moving through that filter to create our reality. Our tomorrows come from that. And this is how I read this opening paragraph. Yeah. The shade reveals where you are formed, where you've come from. The deepest caverns of your own solitude, the awareness of selves stems from this point, beckoning to who you are. It draws you down and through your center. So right here, they are recasting the way we think about our wounds. They're saying, okay, yep, wounds. We're busy trying to heal our wounds. We don't want our wounds. We're trying to get, clear. And they're saying, yeah, but that shade, those wounds, that darkest part of you, right, that's where you've come from, right? It reveals where you are formed. So they're saying that the whole reason of going through this process is to understand ourselves. So all of these bits, all these pieces, that is where we come from. That's our roots. And they're saying the deepest caverns of your solitude. So it's really like the deepest, darkest roots. That's where we have to begin. That's the foundation. That's the place where we begin building our column that goes up, right? And then they say the awareness of selves stems from this point, from the deepest root, right? From the deepest wound. And that's where our awareness comes from, beckoning to who you are. It draws you down and through your center. So it's like it's calling. So imagine you've got this deepest wound. It's calling up to higher self saying, okay, coming down, and somehow we got to bring these two together. How are we going to connect our higher self and our deepest wound? So there's a gap here. They're pointing out in the middle that there's an issue, right? We got higher self who's like, yay, airy fairy, super happy. And then we've got super bum out, deep wound. So thus we have to make a connection. All right. And you're saying, nope, don't want these wounds and find it hard to look at. Totally agree. I totally get it. Oh, and you're saying, thank you for that. The fool is new beginning. Oh, phenomenal. Depicted by jumping off the cliff. Thank you so much for that, Carrie. Awesome. Yeah, love it. So, all right. So next paragraph, they say the secondary rising of humanity comes through and far between another layer of comprehension. So the second rising of humanity, this is our shift, our ascension, this process that we're going through. How do we get there? It comes through and far between another layer of comprehension. So we're building it. Like literally every layer of comprehension is like you're laying down another layer of this root that we're trying to build to get back up, right? So that we can create enough of a connection so the higher self comes in. That's the goal. So it's literally we're trying to bridge between the deepest wound and the highest self. And so they're saying that it comes through and far between the layers. That's how our secondary rising happens. It comes through you now as you are beginning. The second rising of yourselves shall be intermixed with this foreshadowing, and shall carry the weight of your prior selves in the marrow, like bone marrow, the marrow of you becoming. So the idea here is, and they go on to say, at the core of who you become, there shall be this heavier self, the one you are formed from. And this shall strengthen what you are, not weaken it. This shall draw you forward and into a new instantiation of what you will become. So they're saying that this column, the bridge, is going to happen between the thing that's going to connect our deepest wound and our highest self, is all these layers of who we are. And the way that we build this column is by drawing these wounds back into us, all these different facets of ourselves that we accept. Everyone we accept, we pull it in and we add another layer. Like it makes me think of like stalagmites and stalactites, how they're built by like one drop at a time. And you know what I mean? And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but where each drop is like another layer of another life that we have, or another aspect of ourself, I should say, because you could build a whole lot of stalagmite in one life. If you're healing, if you're really working on yourself, that in each one is another layer, and it's the strength, right? And so think about how they're really emphasizing here, this shall strengthen what you are, not weaken it. That there's a lot of emphasis here on strength and about foundations, that we cannot get up there unless we start at the root. We have to have a firm foundation, which means we have to go down to the deepest self, the darkest root, the biggest wound, right? And we have to start there and gradually layer up with all our self-love, right? And that self-love builds and helps to build the bridge so that higher self can come and connect. Yeah. So they say it is, and they're describing it like the marrow of you. Like think of it as like the column is like the marrow, like the bone marrow. Like and it's such an interesting metaphor that they would use marrow, because bone marrow is like super potent, powerful stuff. I should have looked that up because I didn't think of it until now. But bone marrow is like what is it? Is it white blood cells that are created in your bone marrow? It's like, I know bone marrow is like really important. Somebody in a group here who's got medical training, somebody make a comment here about bone marrow. I know it's big. I know bone marrow is like really important, and there's probably something really meaningful in there if you have that. Stem cells. Oh, is that right? Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Wow. Talk about renewal as a symbol for renewal. Stem cells. Is that right? Yeah, so cool. So anyways, but there's a lot about this to think about. The strength, the bones as being the strength, the skeletal structure that strengthens us as a human, and then inside of the bones, inside of the strength, the marrow, right? So that's what they're talking about. I thought it was red blood cells too, white stem cells. I don't know, red, white stem cells. Okay, well, it's good stuff. Whatever it is, it's good stuff. White cells, says Michelle. Okay, thank you. So where is it? Then we go on to say, where did I lose it? At the core of who you come, there shall be this heavier self. The heavier self is like all the wounds and everything else. So in other words, we're not trying to leave it behind. We need it, right? This is the whole reason we did this in the first place. It's not like we went into this situation and accidentally broke apart, and now we're just trying to clean up the mess and get rid of it so we don't get in trouble. We are actually saying, no, this was the whole point, was to break apart. And we're trying to gather each little piece because every little piece is so valuable. Every little piece is important. So the heavier self is the column that's going to carry us upward. Yeah. This shall draw you forward and into a new instantiation of what you will become. The prior selves of who you are not heralded as becoming in this new time frame. So in other words, that is not who we will be. We won't be that old self. We're not going to be all those individual wounds, right? They're saying they are not of the self that rises, but they are intermixed and in between the many layers of who you are. So it's like we bring those into who we are and we love them, right? But that is not it's the full unified self is what rises, not those individual wounds, in other words. They are not the self that rises, but they are intermixed and in between the many layers of what you are. They form the structure, the substance, the meaning, right? So it's a little bit like having, how would you describe it? Like we have the physical body, but then we also have our consciousness. And the physical body is not who we are. The consciousness is who we are. Well, these wounds are not who we are, but they are like the physical body. And then our consciousness is the consciousness, right? So yeah, so that's kind of the best metaphor I can get. All right, and then they go on to say, where is it? But they are intermixed in between. They form the structure, the substance, the meaning. And then they say the caretaking you have done of your own selves rises to meet the next self in the new beyond. So how do we get there? By caretaking all of those selves. So the caretaking of ourselves rises to meet the next self. So how do we build the column? Is by caretaking, by bringing these pieces of ourselves in and loving them, right? But the intermediary has always been the structure of who you are now. So the bridge, the intermediary. And an intermediary is just to define that word, an intermediary acts as a link between two sides to reconcile them, right? So the thing that links it's like it's a conveyor, it's like a bridge. So that is what this is, what we're trying to form. Yeah. The intermediary has always been the structure of who you are now, the conveyor of this timely becoming, and the many seconds spent in understanding what you are now. Yeah, super cool. Melita says, bone marrow makes nearly all the components of your blood. It's responsible for creating billions of red blood cells daily, along with white blood cells and platelets. Bone marrow also stores fat that turns into energy as needed. Super cool. Thank you so much. Ronnie says this is also very deep, getting to some deeply rooted understanding. I totally agree. I feel like this one is like, it's one of those things where you could read it and so much could just go by. But if you spend a little time with it, it's like, okay, there's some major assumptions that they're making about what a soul is that I think are, and some of them really break apart our understanding of ourselves. So it's pretty interesting. All right, they go on to say in the next paragraph, they say, and this is fascinating too, because this reminds me of a video that we got maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I'm going to go back and look in the playlist and see if I can find it for you guys. The message, or this paragraph, they say, the seldom seen layers of your deepest heart carry an internal message to draw forward to you now a secondary heartbeat. So a new becoming, a deeper part of yourself that must rise up and through who you are. So a couple years ago, we got a message where they basically said that there is another us, that we think that we are the one, that we are this cell, we are this life. But the way they described it, this is so fascinating. Back then they said it is as if when we incarnated into this life, we incarnated with two. That there's the self that's going to live up until we shift, and then the new self takes over. So it's literally like we're a double, and it's not that we die in our physical bodies, but it's like a new expression of ourself. And and here they're referring to it. They've never talked about it except for that one message. And I want to go back and read it again, because nowadays when I go back and read the old messages, I tend to understand them a lot better than I did at the time. just because it's like hindsight's 2020, you know what I mean? And then also I have grown since then. So my comprehend, and I just have a lot more comprehension from working with them for so long. So I'd want to go back and read it again. But at the time, I remember my understanding was that it was like we had this double incarnation. So it's like the future part of us who's going to be this new self already is with us, already existing. Yeah. So, so a secondary heartbeat. So let's read that part again. Knowing that, or thinking about that, they say the seldom seen layers of your deepest heart carry an internal message to draw forward to you now a secondary heartbeat, a new becoming, a deeper part of yourself that must rise up and through who you are. It is as though you carry inside of yourself a prior self and a new self conjoined as one. As if this very self and soul you will become rises from you now, connects, and moves through to the beyond measure of which you will endow a treasure. So, in other words, it's so crazy, but it is like, so the angels say they have met our future self. Our future self is there. Like, we've done it. They've said this many times, that we've succeeded, we've ascended, we've shifted, and we've become this new state of being. But this paragraph, and then it reminds me of that old message where they talked about this. It basically saying that that future self is currently inside of us and is hidden somewhere deep down in there, and we can't access it, right? They're saying here a secondary heartbeat, a deeper part of yourself that must rise up and through. So the only way that other self can get out is if we create the bridge. We have to create the column inside that goes from the deepest wound, which if we heal that deepest wound, I think that is what lets this other future self up. And we make the bridge, and then boom, we get to be there, right? So it's like we're born, like this life is like a twofer. You know, we get two experiences at once. We get a 3D experience and people call it 5D, call it whatever you want. But in order to make this transition, in order to go through this really unusual experience of shifting while inside a physical body, which apparently, like everybody's saying, and the angels have said, this is not a typical thing. Like, this is unusual for species to go through this process while incarnated. So in order to do it, I think that we were incarnated a little differently with two somethings. And I don't want to call it two souls because it's one soul, but it's like two heartbeats is the way they describe it. A heartbeat, a secondary heartbeat, right? Is that a mind blower? Like, absolute mind blower. Yeah. You're saying, yeah, literally Anne said we brought a buddy with. I did just say that, I think. Wow, Sasrani, that is so beautiful about double incarnations today and tomorrow. That is it really is, yeah. And Erin says that this bridge or column is that what is opening the gift in the gift activation course. Now, the column is being built by through soul convergence. Soul convergence helps you build the column. So it is the process of picking up all those facets, and each one we heal, each one we bring in, we build a little bit more of the column. And the goal is to get the way that we really get connected to the higher self. We have to balance our masculine and feminine energies and bring them together. When we bring them together, boom, the connection is made. And then their gift activation, what's happening in the gift activation, which is something that the gift activation course, which I haven't talked about it here very much, because you have to go through soul convergence in order to do it. You have to have gone through that process because you build a special reservoir of energy, which is used for this process. But the angels in gift activation are literally going to clear your channel. Everybody has spiritual gifts. They clear the channel for your gifts, and then and that's not uncommon. That there are many different processes you can go through to clear your channel, but what is unusual is they are going to expand and fortify those channels, and that's very unusual. So I'm super excited for it. So that's what's happening in soul convergence. Yeah. It's like I said, I haven't, for those of you who haven't heard about it, I'm sorry. It's just because it's only open for people who have gone. It wouldn't work on somebody who hasn't gone through soul convergence. So yeah. And Mary says, it is an interesting way to think of it that we are actually two people at once, but I don't feel like it changes anything as far as our processing to reach higher vibration. I totally agree. I think it's interesting to understand it and to, because there may be like, I don't know if we're going to experience that other part of ourself or if we just evolve into that other part of ourself. Like, I don't know if one subsides and the other falls in our consciousness. I really don't know. It's a really, maybe we wake up one morning and we are different, you know? Like, I think that could happen. I don't really know. Yeah. And And you say, you serve up a massive steak for dinner. Thank you. But then you also cut it up for us. That is so cute. Thank you, Rodney. Most of us could not easily assimilate what you are serving today. Thank you so much. Yeah, it is, I agree. This is a complicated message, but a really, really interesting one. All right, so then they go on to say, a new becoming, a deeper part of yourself that must rise up and through who you are. It is as though you carry inside of yourself a prior self and a new self conjoined as one. As if this very self and soul you will become rises from you now, connects and moves through to the beyond measure of which you will endow a treasure. So in other words, that inner being is a treasure, right? They go on to say next paragraph, the self who you are is betwixt the many layers of meaning that have been formed in the discovery of self. So this is what they're talking about, building the stalactite, right? Which is like every little drop, every little shard of glass we collect, right? That is betwixt the, so the self who you are is in between all these different layers as we're slowly climbing this column inside of us as we heal. And they say, but these past harmonies dwell within you still. These seconds of meaning, secondary time frames, alternate realities, new beginnings, all conjoined into harmony and play a chord. And this chord you shall climb toward your ascension and shift in consciousness. It is as though a bridging has begun through you. So this is really, they're describing in more detail this idea of the center column and that it is a bridge and it's formed of all these, right? All these secondary time frames, alternate realities, new beginnings, like all our past selves, all the aspects of ourself. Yeah. So then they go on to say, through the rising energies, the column at your center, as though all that has been undergone and undone has created a pathway through which you move. And look at how beautifully that is said. All through all that has been undergone and undone. So the undergone is like all the trauma we've been through, and then undone is the healing of that trauma. Yeah. And the healing it creates a pathway through which you move. So each of these parts of us has to be expressed, has to be felt. So all these lives, we had to live them. We had to live them fully, right? We had to really go in and feel it. And then that is what gives us the experience of ourselves, that creates us into a multifaceted being. Yeah. And Elia says, wow, I felt that second me during the message. It was amazing, flush of love, and heart started hurting. Wow, we'll listen again. Super, super cool. Yeah, that is awesome, Elia. And then, so let's go on to the next paragraph. The second understanding of you exists now in another place far beyond here. So they're saying that, because there is no such thing as time. So this other being inside of us in our future self is already there. So we know we get there. This other being does exist. And it is who we will be as we go through this shift. So they're really identifying this is another, it's you, but it's like another you. And I think about that with my own kids. If those of you who have children, my kids will sometimes ask me, like, do you miss me being 3 or do you miss me being 5 or whatever? And it's funny because I think about like every age, they change so much. Like my kids are in their 20s and having, like, I love them as they are and I would never want to go backward, but I do miss the little 3-year-old that they were, like as if that was another person. Like it was if I could have them all, like, you know what I mean? I'd like to go spend a day with my 3-year-old kids, because that'd be fun, you know. It'd be so much fun to spend a day with them when they were 3 and then to come back and be where they are today, because where they are today is awesome. But it is like they are another self, you know, that's like encapsulated in that time period. And it would be really cool to go back and visit them. Yeah. And so I think that it's like that for us with our future self, that it is like it's us, but it's a different us. Yeah. And so that secondary understanding of you exists now in another place far beyond here, beyond the reach of your own consciousness as it sits. It is a secondary placement of your reality existing now, so the future, I think, not permeable to yourselves at the moment. It is as if your meaning extends beyond tomorrow into a new framework entirely, and you cannot know the context yet, for it does not yet exist. So we create it, the new context of who we will be in that new framework. It doesn't exist because we are in the process. Who we are becoming is then going to create that new context. Yeah. It surrounds you now and will evolve as that time is met. But to create the conveyance to move through, you must begin and find yourself upon a precipice and throw yourself off into the engulfing chasm of this now known cosmos and reality. So this description. I see this as the description of incarnating, right? So that the new reality will surround us as we evolve. We will create it when we get there. But they say, but in order to create the conveyance, the bridge to get there, how do we make this column through us? The only way to get there is to throw ourselves off the precipice by incarnating, right? And they say, and within the space of incarnating, you unfurl and unveil yourself in many ways at once. So, which is in that by itself is a bit of a mind blower, because we think of time as sequential. We call them past lives, but they're all happening right now. Time is not real, right? We experience time, but time doesn't actually exist. So when we break apart into a billion pieces, all of those lives, boom, they're all created at once. So, which is fascinating. And so then they say, and throw yourself off. Where's it? And within the space, you unfurl and unveil yourself in many ways at once, and become something of a divided prospect and perspective of oneself. And then, as if in this fractionalization, you can divide yourself into so many meanings, and in the process of becoming each one, create anew the lacings and intertwinings by which you shall recreate the whole again. So it's literally, we break apart, we become all these little selves, and then we go and we live each self fully. We like go into that little piece of, tempered glass, whatever, and we're like, I'm going to do this life big. I'm going to do it as hard as I can do it, right? I'm going to be that whatever I was in that life. And then as we do that, and as we really love and get to know and express that being, then that becomes part of the whole again. Yeah. Super interesting. So next paragraph, they say, and in this process, you find your way through. So beyond the chasm of doubt and uncertainty, back to the wholeness. So the chasm, so when we break apart, we fall into separation, and we fall into uncertainty and doubt, because we don't have the big picture anymore. We're just a tiny piece of it. But the more we pull back together, the closer we get to our divinity. Yeah. To our wholeness. Yeah. They say beyond, where is that? Beyond the chasm of doubt and uncertainty, back to the wholeness, beyond conjecture, into sureness, into self as solid matter, as self who is resolved upon in the time frame beyond the now. So, and I love that they say, like, it's so interesting to say into the self as solid matter. So I think they put that here because we think of what is real, we think of as solid matter. Like, think about the test for, is it real? Like, can I touch it? Can I taste it? Can I smell it? Like, is it real? Is it solid matter? And I think they're playing with us a little bit here, saying that when we draw all these pieces back to ourselves, then we become real. Then we become solid matter. And yeah, we are solid in that future self, but the fact that they're using it in this way here, I think is playing with us a little bit, and the way our consciousness has been limited until now in terms of understanding things not as energy but as solid. And to say, yeah, we think of solid as real, but when we are a unified self, that is when we are truly real. That's when we are our full self, as opposed to being separated, right? As opposed to being in conjecture, as opposed to sureness. We have conjecture when we're in separation, when we're behind the veil. We don't really know the big picture. We're just guessing. We have conjecture about the truth of reality and how things work. When we are reconnected to our own guidance, to our higher self, then we have sureness. And then we are solid matter. Then we are real, right? Yeah. So then they go on to say, this perspective that we share of yourself is congratulatory. I love that. They say, for we see you as you are become. In other words, we've already made it. So they're congratulating us now for our future success. They go on to say, as we have met you already, we see you in the context without formality, as one who is disguised no longer. So like that's where we are so open, so sure of ourselves in the sense of loving ourselves, right? That we surrender any need to hide, that we are totally open. That is when we get to the state of complete self-love and acceptance, right? So without formality, no disguises, who wears themselves in all incarnations and all ways and methods of having been evolved, and you carry this neatly within your frameworks. This is when you're fully expressed as a soul with all those aspects brought back in, fully loved, within the very bones that circulate. So another reference to the marrow there, within the marrow of your soul, there it is. within the bones. So the bones are the structure, the framework, the structure, the marrow, right? They're really getting into this idea that what forms us, yes, we have this higher self, this higher consciousness that we're trying to connect to, but the structure that we need to do it is all this healing that we're doing. It's all these wounds that we're experiencing, all this stuff that we're like, I don't want that. That's our structure. So they're really bringing us back to this understanding that this is important work that we're doing. We are building the foundations of our future experience of existence is what we're doing right now. Yeah. They go on to say, here holds the history that you are evolving even now. Here holds the great and sonorous envelopment of existing beyond the veil. And that means this is the sonorous envelopment of existing beyond the veil. So when we're behind the veil, a sonorous envelopment of existing. So I love that phrase because it really is speaking to how incredibly engrossing it is to be incarnated, how immersive it is, how we think about it, like even your dreams, when you have a dream at night and you wake up and you're like, oh wait, I dreamt something and I can't remember it. Like you're so immersed in reality that it slips like out of our brain. Like it just goes away, and we're back smack into like, this is a table, back into reality. And reality is so immersive and it's so thick and so dense. I once had a vision of reality where I was in a deep state and I saw the reality around us like, it was like a gel. It wasn't air. It was everything is gel. So this is weird. All of the air is actually gel. And I don't know why or what that means, but it's conductive gel is everything around us. And this is how we manifest through this conductive gel. And it looks like air and we don't see the gel, but I saw the gel. I saw it so clearly and it's everywhere. Yeah, everything is gel. I know it sounds really, really strange. Someday we will probably all see the gel. We will all have good hair days. So it's so corny. Sorry. It was like low-hanging fruit. I couldn't avoid it. Okay. So sonorous envelopment. We are totally surrounded by this reality, right? In the history that you were evolving even now, the history that we're creating in this current experience of life, enveloping beyond the veil where all things are felt to be real and nothing is pertinent to who you really are. In other words, everything that happens here we think is real, when in reality, it doesn't even matter. It's like a dream state. And we get to the other side and we're like, that was just for learning. Like that was just an exercise, but it feels so real, right? And then they say all of this congeals into the solidity of understanding that creates a soul of multifaceted dimension. So this is how we become that soul with all the different sides where we see ourselves in every possible angle. And think about that. Think about a diamond before it's been cut. And it's still a diamond, but it's not nearly as pretty, right? It doesn't reflect the light in the same way. When you facet a diamond, it becomes brilliant. And the more facets it has, the more brilliant it becomes. So that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to become a multifaceted soul, a soul that is expressed in as many ways as possible, that has gone like double down on being itself and knows itself deeply. And that makes it that much more brilliant and beautiful. Yeah. Let's see, sonorous envelopment, where that congeals into the solidity of understanding that soul creates, where it is, the soul of multifaceted dimension. And reality conforms to who you will be then. And you will become something far greater than you have been. One who can reveal within their own heart pathways to begin forming a new wholeness of consciousness, a new serenade of sharing between and among humans. And I think what they mean by this is really beautiful. I think what they're saying here that we become something or someone, and I like that they say someone, something, because they're saying we are an individual and we are a collective. We are someone, which is the individual, and something, which is the collective. Something greater, far greater than we've ever been. One who can reveal within their own heart the pathway. So how do we do that? Is because we've forgiven ourselves, that we've accepted ourselves. So when we accept ourselves, we create the pathway to accepting everyone. And that leads us to unity. So the pathways begin forming, we find in our own heart the pathways to begin forming a whole new wholeness of consciousness, and it comes from that self-love. We love ourselves, we love everyone. A new serenade of sharing between and among humans. Just beautiful. And I wrote some notes here, just to make sure I didn't miss that part. Oh, I wrote in here, your history congeals at your center to give you a depth of understanding that turns you into a soul of multifaceted dimension. Yeah, okay. And that was just a note I made. All right, so last paragraph, they say, within this new time framework of solidity, the time shall be felt as mere seconds, but the reality shall carry the information of leagues, of generations, of all you've ever been. So that is really saying that a minute could go by, but in that second, like in other words, everything is permeated with the fullness of your own truth. So that it's like you just radiate it, like all that history, every life you've ever lived, every little facet you've turned over to understand about yourself, every one of those is vibrating all the time in one unified awareness, right? You've accepted and incorporated all of it in a way that it makes a soul, your soul, right? And then that just reverberates like a song, all these different notes of who you are moving through you like your own personal song. And it's just constant, right? It's beautiful. And all of this is pervasive throughout your spoken tones, as though the wisdom you've accumulated is a chorus that moves through you and with every breath. And you carry all of this within and among and between one another. So in other words, it's the wisdom. It's the wisdom of living, of experiencing yourself. And remember that you are originally that little facet of God. Like you are that original fractal piece of source that went out to understand yourself. So your chorus, your piece is then becoming part of a much larger orchestra, and it's critical because it is the one individual expression of a magnificent part of the divine that then has to experience itself by breaking it apart. Yeah, in all those pieces. Yeah. And you carry all of this within and among and between one another. And it is the wisdom of lives that are shared in congruence with the reality that behooves you all. So, in other words, your song is moving around in between everybody else's song, and all those songs come together, right? And become an orchestra, like one orchestration, like one big giant song. And that giant song creates our reality. Yeah. And a reality that behooves everyone. Right? Where all is shared, admired, and conformed into a container which shall be revealed by the thoughts formed within it. So that's a mind bender right there. So everything is shared. In other words, you share your song, I share my song, and all of these songs come together to make one big song. And those songs all together form a container that we are all within, which is our reality. So we have a shared reality that is formed by our evolved songs. And then that container is revealed by our individual thoughts within the container. So we experience the container from within it by our thoughts, right? So it's like, I know it's like inside and outside and inside, and but hopefully that made sense because that's confusing, but it's true and it's deep. And so, wow, that's all I can say. Wow. Oh my gosh, you guys, thank you for hanging in on this one. It was like, there was a lot. This is a deep and interesting message, and it seems so simple on the surface, but there's a lot in it. So what are you guys saying? Let's see. I'm going to go back here a little bit. And you said, M says, yes, I want my kids at every age still too. Maybe not each one all day, every day, right? Just cherry pick. If we could cherry pick, I want the really good days, the really cuddly, sweet days, right? But from time to time, I would love to hang with the different age of my kids. Me too. Yeah. And Aaron says, yes, totally. I'd love to have a visit with a little version of my kids. Dashini says, you can in dreams go back in time, the dream of the dead and play with them even. Yeah, you're so right, Dashini. Yeah. And Carrie says, so much deja vu in this message. Ooh, interesting, Carrie. Rodney says, when we accept ourselves fully, self-love, we become whole or solid matter. Beautiful. Yes, right? Isn't it? It's like the opposite of what we think, because we think we're going to become lighter, but they're using that solid matter as we become more real. Like we are more who we really are. Yeah. I think it is plasma. That is what the goo is. The gel is plasma. You're exactly right. Thank you for that. Yeah. And Mary says gel meaning plasma. Yeah, I absolutely think what it is. I think it's plasma everywhere. Yeah. So if you try it sometimes, get into a deep trance state and try to see the plasma. It's everywhere. It's there. I'm telling you, it's there. Yeah. And then M says, that actually makes sense. Hair gel these days doesn't look like gel once it dries and you scrunch it out, just like air gel. Love the diamond metaphor. Me too. Krista says, I get the image of bees leaving the hive to gather pollen and then come back to the crafted hive and make honey. Our highest self is the queen. Ooh, that's a great metaphor, Krista. Yeah, totally. I love that. That's a really beautiful way to think of it. Yeah. So Mary says, so our reality is made up of song. Yes. Yeah. And if you think of a song, like the song is a nice metaphor because it's made up of, you don't have a song unless you have lots of notes, right? That if you have just a note, then it's just a note. It's not a song. A song is like, yeah, it's got lots of notes and all those different notes are different. And think of it also, like people talk about, like if you've ever been a wine drinker and people talk about the notes of the wine, like this has a note of olives or whatever. And each of those is like a different flavor, a different essence. So the notes of a song is each one of those is like, and I like that it's a note is nice. Like when they talk about notes in wine, it's like a beautiful, good thing. Like all these different parts of yourself are beautiful notes. And so, yeah, absolutely cool. And Jashini says, sometimes I can even hear it. So that's what it is. The song of our reality. That is beautiful. Wouldn't it be amazing to tune into it? I've heard people who've had near-death experiences and they go to the other side and they hear everything is music. Everything. Yeah. So cool. And let me just go back a little bit here because I missed some of your comments. And let's see. Carrie says, something happened years ago where I saw two thin silver cords floating above me into the sky. I wish I could find out more, although I think it's something almost like this channeling. You know, maybe that's it. Maybe they were, because when we are incarnated, like if you have ever had an experience where you've had like a dream where you've been moved forward, like I had a dream of the future before. A lot of times if you dream about the future, you will look down and see, or if you're a person who leaves your body, if you astral travel, there's a silver cord that carries you back to your body. So if you saw two silver cords, that would definitely fit this message. That would be like the idea that there are two versions of us, two incarnations of our soul in one body. Yeah. So wild, huh? White cell, you're saying, oh, there you go. And let me just go up a little bit more because I missed something else. And you're saying, it's so interesting. Today I came across inspiration quotes I have saved last year, like the Journey into Fulfillment, where they gave us this prayer to strengthen our buddy, the column of light. And the first paragraph reading, I am whole and holy, and I transfer my thought and will into the column of light at my central core. Oh, interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yep. So, oh my gosh, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Beautiful to spend the day with you. And I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Don't forget, if you want to join Soul Convergence, we start next Saturday. I think it's the 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific is our kickoff call. Hopefully, if you are planning on joining us, don't forget to sign up before then. And then the next time we offer Soul Convergence will be down the road maybe at least 3-4 months from now. So this is the time to jump in if you want to begin. It's really an incredibly transformative process. All right, you guys, have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next Friday live. Bye, you guys.